When I see high-level performance, I see leaders living their best life, being a great soul, making a big difference, and learning to receive. I'm JD, the VIP Coach, and you're listening to the VIP Coach Podcast, liberating leaders, saving geniuses, and growing companies. Bringing leaders to these aspects is what I do, because they need creative freedom to make a big jump in their career. They need to help the world see the opportunity of them, and they rely on their most important gifts and talents to leverage their effectiveness. This is the pathway to high-level performance, and it's about lifestyle, freedom, and growth. Welcome. Okay, so in the call, I have Dave Knibbe, PhD. Dave is an elite coach and trainer for HLP, high-level performance. He specializes in individual and team performance acceleration, talent development, and career advancement. And over the course of 40,000 hours of professional practice and university business school teaching, thousands of people have sought Dave for advice, guidance, solutions to their most relentless problems, having to do with the development and retention of their key talent. In addition to his coaching and training, Dave has delivered a number of keynote speeches on magnifying talent to professional industry conferences. Now, in this podcast, Dave is going to build a compelling case to leverage these powerful conversations to magnify and sustain talent of the future. So, Dave, welcome to the call.
John, thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
So where I'd like to start is to talk about the topic of Magnify and why it makes sense. Why is it so important today?
Those are great questions, John. I'd like to start out by telling two short stories that reveal what magnification is and what it is not. And then I will explain why magnifying others is now more important than ever. First story is about my dad. He joined the Army at age 18-19. He was a World War II Army combat vet, fought in the bloody campaign of the Philippine Islands. So as a young man, he had to grow up fast to learn how to survive in that kind of environment. When he returned home from the war, he spent the rest of his life in service to others in the public school business. We lost him about 3 years ago at age 93. And here's my point. Before he died, I had a powerful conversation with him where I asked him for his advice and counsel that I could apply for the rest of my life. And this is what he said. Dave, whatever you touch well. And what he meant by that was simply always do my very best at work, school, and with all people that intersected my life. And this story illustrates, John, what I mean by magnifying others. During our conversation, my dad imparted priceless advice to me, words which I've been running on ever since. John, my second story involved my coaching a high-potential finance professional whom I will call Jane. Now, Jane worked for a major medical device company, and she was in the early stages of her career. And on the surface, everything seemed well with her. She was getting great generalized feedback. Everybody was telling her that she was doing a great job, keep up the good work, that kind of thing. But underneath the surface, she was desperate for specific feedback about her performance and how she could improve. That was a key part of her makeup. And again, she was constantly being told that she was doing a great job, and even to the point where when it was time for her performance review with her manager simply sat her down, took 5 minutes and said, "Hey, Jane, you're doing a great job. Just sign this form. I'll take care of you." And with that generalized pattern of receiving feedback, she became more and more anxious about where she stood with the company, wanting details as to why she was performing well so that she could improve. And so again, when I started coaching her, all of this came out in our initial discussions. I then spoke with her manager and taught her manager about the importance of magnifying Jane. And luckily, it was not too late for Jane, and they were able to retain her. Her manager simply took the time to sit down with Jane and review her project performance as well as her overall performance for the year, and got into the specifics as to why she was performing so well, what they liked about her performance, and what they appreciated. So they provided her with the information she needed and the recognition that she thrived on and needed in order to be retained. And luckily, they were able to turn that situation around with Jane, and she's still working with the company today. So the first story with my dad was about my being magnified through his advice and counsel. The second story is an example of what not to do, because Jane was not being magnified. As a matter of fact, she was actually being diminished in her self-image and was about ready to leave. So those are two, I think, very good examples of what I mean by magnification. Magnification means, and I'll start with the root word of M-A-G-N, it means great. And so magnification means to focus, enlarge, improve others, and to help them be great and so forth. It's developing others. It's magnifying the talents and abilities inside ourselves through one-on-one coaching, training, example, positive reinforcement, what have you, but it's magnifying those things that are in ourselves onto others so that they can do and be better themselves. And it's such an important concept, especially in today's very strange and different work world that has been hugely impacted by the pandemic. And that's why magnifying is so important. As you look at it, the pandemic has permanently changed the way that we approach and perform work, and by whom. For example, 1 in every 4 workers in the economy now is in the 55 plus age range. Many are working longer, putting off their retirement, and so forth. We're going to have to look to those baby boomers to teach and train and mentor younger workers who are entering the workplace. And they're going to have to adapt to the younger workers' work ethic and style and being able to connect with them. A study recently reviewed that Gen Zers expected to have a lot of conflict working with baby boomers. Well, that doesn't have to be the case, and it can't be the case. Another example is by the year 2030, we will have a huge percentage of millennials and Gen Zs in the workplace. So talk about having a mixed workforce. Man, it's just around the corner. A mixed workforce in terms of skills, age, gender, generation, race, disability, work ethic, and so forth. And so what this all means is that those in the workforce and magnifying leaders, great leaders, people that we're coaching and training and helping, they're going to have to pull this workforce together so that they can understand and appreciate and recognize one another's differences and as well as their strengths to make sure that they collaborate effectively and get things done. So there's a lot of pressure on everyone to perform in the coming years, and this is where magnifying leadership comes in. And that's what this podcast is all about.
Very good. Very good. You bring up the divine discontent, Dave. Can you go into that a bit more? Because that sounds like it's a moment in time where there's a realization, there's an aha moment where it's like all of a sudden you see where you are, but you also see a possibility. Do you find that to be true in these one-on-ones? Is that the breakthrough?
I think that is, John. I think that is because it helps whether you are on the giving side or the receiving side in terms of that magnifying conversation. Both benefit, but especially let's say, for example, if I were offering some career guidance to someone and they were just unhappy with where they were at, and they had done some honest self-appraisal and determined that, hey, I'm not living up to my potential. When you have that magnifying conversation, that helps kind of break through that feeling of discontent. And it empowers one to take those next steps that would take them beyond that. In other words, where I'm at today is not where I want to be, but where I want to be tomorrow is what I need to work on. And that moment of divine discontent is a breakthrough moment.
Mm-hmm. So there's transformation there. There's a gateway.
That's exactly right.
From it's almost like we're leaving a world where we were. It's interesting, and then we're moving to a world where we could be. But it sounds like there's a choice there. There's a responsibility that one starts to take. Is that leadership?
That is leadership. That's leadership again from the giver who's trying to magnify someone because they see something great in that person, and they're trying to help them get to that breakthrough moment. But it's also self-leadership or self-command, where the individual receiving that guidance or counsel or coaching finally gets to a point where, I've got to do this, otherwise I'm going to be stuck. And the old saying is, if I keep on doing what I'm doing, I'll keep on getting what I'm getting. And that just adds to that sense of discontent. So yes, indeed it is a moment of leadership, both on the giver's part as well as the receiver's part. And then the person who is being magnified, then once they have that realization, then the real hard work begins. They have to then create a plan and execute the plan and stay on track and sustain it over a period of time. Otherwise, they slip back. They lose ground that they've gained. So it's a stepwise process, but it all begins with that breakthrough moment of divine discontent.
Mm-hmm. Can I throw a curveball?
Sure, please.
Let's say I'm a CEO and I'm developing my management team, and several of them have indicated that they're very set in their ways, that they have very clear-minded positions, convictions. And so I come out of conversations wondering if they're receptive. And although I may want this one-on-one influence, it's clear to me that they're not reverent to what I can give. There's something missing there. So I start to put my investments into others that are more comfortable with their ignorance. They're more comfortable with kind of answering questions for themselves that they haven't figured out. There seems to be a disposition. So what would you tell a CEO who has a few closed-minded individuals, a few stubborn individuals that aren't coachable? How would you propose they work with people that aren't ready for the divine discontent moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've seen that situation many times in my career, John. A two-part answer. Number one, the CEO should not give up on those individuals if he or she thinks they have the potential and they've had the track record that have got them to where they are. Maybe they're stuck somehow, something's going on. So my advice to that CEO would be, as appropriate, continue to have those magnifying one-on-one conversations using data, using reality, and trying to help them get to that point of divine discontent where they see it and then they're ready to do something about it. So continue, provide more feedback, and so on and so forth, working with them that way. Now, on the other part of the question would be the CEO could also work very intensively with those who get it, who are reverent to their counsel and guidance, and help them execute new plans will take themselves and the company to a higher step. And that exercise will allow those who are still on the sidelines to see, hey, this is working for someone else here on the team, and will give them a sense of, I want more of this. And that example might help them reach that point of divine discontent quicker, so that they get on the playing field instead of hanging on the sidelines and being happy with the score. If that does that make sense?
It does. And what are the signs that someone is ready for it? How do I know? What are the factors that would tell me it's a green light? How do I know someone's ready, willing, and able for that conversation?
They start to ask more questions. They start to show visually more discontent with themselves. They're impatient. They start to understand as they view this current situation that there's more that they can do, that they could do better and be better. And sometimes that improvement, once they hit that divine discontent moment, sometimes that improvement will come incrementally. Sometimes it could be a breakthrough moment, but you'll be able to see it in their voice, in their mannerisms, and their questions. And when they see others getting back into the game and improving, then again they will want to follow. And if they don't, ultimately, then that's a sign with the CEO that they need to make a change.
Mm. Yes, this is an important piece. I thank you for that. Because the
Sure.
CEO's time, of course, yes, is valuable, and we often say don't water weeds. So it's learning where they're going to invest this. What really struck me, Dave, was this piece about continuing to sort of chip away at the opportunity to go into the Magnify moment and not give up on someone. And I would suppose that's an interesting space because there's probably a point where the CEO is getting an internal voice to just give up on someone. When's it time to really pull out? When someone's just not really ready, willing, and able to have a learning type conversation like this.
That's right.
And be receptive. So there's probably learning blocks that become terminal, and there's just no potential or prognosis for change. On the other hand, there's these moments where, like, highly receptive, someone that's just eating up this sort of thing, and it sounds like, now this is maybe in my mind, but maybe one of the prerequisites also that I would imagine would be, I know I need help and I've evaluated why I need help, and therefore I'm receptive to getting help. So maybe I don't know my own needs. My experience has been that individuals get around 34 or 35 in their life in this moment when they come to a realization that their rugged individualism is no longer going to help them and that they need to do something different because things get very difficult. Do you find that to be true in your walk and your coaching?
Absolutely. They get stuck in their ways. They've been happy with their results in the past. But and we know that the world of work that we're living in right now is constantly changing. And if they don't get to a point where they can adapt, and also, by the way, it just includes and requires some good old-fashioned humility. People admitting that they need help. They've done a self-assessment. They realize that their progress has been limited or stopped for whatever reason, and so they get to that moment, and that's where they're most teachable or coachable. And if the CEO sees that in them, and because of past history, they've had a good history with that individual, they have played and performed well, but they just get stuck, then that would be certainly a motivational piece for the CEO to continue to work with them for a while. A quick example is whether it's Tiger Woods or some other great athlete, they've all gotten to a point where they've gotten on a plateau of performance, and they all have coaches and trainers. And so they've been open to feedback and guidance and counsel that helps them break through their situation being stuck. And that's what the CEO can and try to do with those individuals. But, after repeated attempts, if they're not willing or able to take themselves to that next level of high performance, then it's time for the CEO to humanely manage them out of the company or put them in a different assignment. So that's my thinking. And the CEO has to make a decision about how much time they have, evaluate the history they've had with that individual. Is it worth the time? And so forth. Are they still a good match for the job that lies ahead, or do they need to be placed in a different role? So
I see.
There's a lot involved.
There's a lot involved. You bring up assessments. Where do assessments come into play in determining this sort of readiness for a developmental plan or the process of one-on-one? How do you use the assessments in that process?
Well, I look into at least two major overriding factors, and that is the individual's knowledge, experience, skill set, and good old-fashioned capability and capacity to perform a job. That's one thrust of the assessments. But then you also have to look at their level of self-confidence, their maturity, and their inner sense of are they ready? And some people may have the skill set, but they may not lack the self-confidence for some reason. That creates a point where they're stuck, and the CEO or coach needs to identify that. And when ultimately they're ready, they're determined, and they have the skill set to do something, that's a great moment. And the assessment process can reveal that. You can do that through interviews. You can observe them in performance and doing their job. There's some tests and surveys that can be taken. You want to collect a lot of different data points in order to get to that those concluding themes about that individual's skill set and readiness. And when you have all that packaged together, working with the individual, then you can help them get quicker, hopefully arrive quicker at that point of divine discontent. And when they get that point, then you help them create a plan, and away they go.
I see. So how would I measure this? If I'm leading an organization and I'm wanting to magnify, how do I measure the effectiveness of it?
Well, certainly when you have the assessment laid out, then you can measure it by coming up with a very robust development plan, an action plan, putting things into place in terms of, I like to think in terms of three things. What does that individual need to learn and know about that, taking that next step in their career or that next assignment? So there's a learning piece, and then what do they need to actually do? And that's the action piece, and that should be mapped out in terms of metrics and milestones and timelines and so forth. And then you also want to have that individual embrace an idea of what they want to become. So it's learn, do, and be or become, strive to become. And so when you have that action plan in place, then you can start to help them execute it and measure it and call them to accountability for their results or when they have slipped and so forth. And there's some other parts of the magnifying interview process that we can talk about that would help a coach or a CEO to bring out those points and help them execute their plan. So I don't know if that makes sense, but the assessment should translate into a very robust, actionable plan that you then follow and provide feedback along the way.
Okay, this is great. So Dave, does the participant, do they construct the development plan, or does the coach do that?
It's really a process of both. But in my experience, I started out with doing it all for the individual, but I found early on that was not the right approach, and so I shifted. And I helped the individual go through all the feedback from the assessment. I gave that individual a development planning template, and then they started to populate it first. And then I helped them refine it. And I found that when they actually were involved and had more skin in the game, it was a much better product at the end because, again, they were really the author of that development plan. I just magnified them or helped them along the way, but they were the ones that were responsible for it because ultimately that's the way it should be. At some point, the coach drops out of the picture and they have to continue performing and sustaining on their own. So I found that process to work the best, John.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Does their superior also, Dave, at some level, their CEO or who they report to, also get involved in the development plan?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a great question. After, for example, I've got several individuals that I'm working with right now, and I'm helping them refine their plans. And then the next step would be to meet with the CEO or their direct manager and go through the highlights of their assessment, and then talk about the development plan that I helped them create. And we take them through that step by step, make sure that the CEO or direct manager is on board, that we've taken their input into account. We make sure the development plan includes that, and then I help them execute the plan. So the CEO or the direct manager is very much involved in the process. And then as they execute the plan, then we go back and visit with the direct manager periodically to give them updates on their performance and progress.
This is helpful. So how do I, if I'm at the level of I'm so busy that I can't get to things that could make me less busy, because this sounds like it's the right thing to do to grow my organization, build my team, help my leaders, succession me. You know, one of the things I often talk about in my coaching is operational irrelevance, how to remove the senior leaders from the day to day and really build their leaders up to those levels, invest and magnify. What I'm wondering is when it appears to be so little time and things are so busy, how do I value what these one-on-ones could mean? How do I frame this? How do I look at it so I can get my own buy-in, get buy-in from my team when it looks like it's, oh my gosh, it's one more thing to do. Do we need more meetings? How does an organization start to make it a priority?
That's a great question. Let me give you just a little bit of background. I found through my own research and also from the research of others that individuals who are supposed to be conducting these one-on-ones, these managers, many either A, claim they don't have the time and therefore they don't do it, or B, if they are conducting one-on-ones, it's more of a rote 20-minute meeting once every week or 2 weeks where they follow a little checklist. And it's largely where they ask the individual to give them an update on their performance. Both approaches are totally incorrect and ineffective. And so it's also trying to help leaders, CEOs, and others get to a point for their own divine discontent where they understand, hey, if I don't invest some time in magnifying my direct reports and others, there will not be the kind of growth and performance that should be accomplished. And so it's helping them understand that these magnifying conversations are very important, and they should cover three things. Number one, they should communicate to the other person high standards of performance and high standards of character, so that the individual reporting to them are clear about the what part of the job, which is the performance and the content of the job, and the how is the character side of the job, that they have to perform or execute their job in a way that's, ethical and upright. That's important. Number two, a good magnifier, if you will provide and be very responsive when it comes to providing timely and specific praise and commendation. And that's free. That's good old-fashioned positive reinforcement, positive feedback, and providing that on a regular basis. It doesn't have to be during a formal one-on-one. It can be on the spot, often should be on the spot in the moment, and providing that reinforcement, that commendation, or on the flip side, being very responsive to provide correction and counsel when necessary. They don't have to wait. If they see that an individual slipping or there's a gap occurring between what that high standard of performance is and where they're actually performing at, they need to provide that corrective counsel to close that gap. That makes sense. And then finally, the third, probably the most important ingredient to conducting these effective one-on-ones is making sure that they are connected, that they convey and demonstrate care and concern for the other individual. Because if they don't invest that time in demonstrating their care and concern, when it's time to give them feedback or time to have some kind of a meeting, the individual won't be as receptive to that counsel or that coaching or training because they didn't invest the time in that individual. Why should I take this criticism, if you will, from someone when I know that they don't care about me? It's that kind of thing. So I just wanted to emphasize that a highly effective CEO, manager, whomever that wants to magnify others, they have to realize that they have to put some time into it. It's the old saying: if you don't pay me now, you'll pay me later. So they realize that conducting these one-on-ones, magnifying moments, are very, very important. And then if they follow those three key principles of conducting effective and powerful one-on-ones, they will be successful, and the other individual receiving the magnification will be successful as well. Kind of a long answer, but I wanted to just get some of those points out.
They're very important, and it was great, Dave, because you really went into more of the moving parts, the anatomy of the process. And so what I'm getting on that is the more clarity that the process has, it builds meaning. It builds something that is really unskippable. Makes it more essential and indispensable in the sense that when a leader is caring and connected this way, that's pretty hard to deny. My coach wants to invest in me, or my CEO wants to invest in me. That's also a great signal. I mean, how many leaders have I seen that, it's kind of cold to say, but they're very systems dependent and they really don't care, And so there are those
exactly
that just
right.
want to, right? It's not about developing my leaders. I don't want to magnify them. What do you think some of those impediments are in the hearts and minds of the ones that are giving, that hold them back?
Well, and I like to use your term on this, John. If they don't view that one-on-one as a sacred time and a sacred moment, then they need to do some correction themselves. They need to reassess what they're doing, why they're being blocked, or why they no longer want to invest the time. Could be a number of reasons, but the thing is that if they don't, I'm at the point where if people do not invest in these magnifying conversations, they will not get the kind of results that they're looking for, and their performance will start to slip, as well as others. So I think it's a combination of both. If they suddenly find themselves stuck or unwilling, then they better step back very quickly and reassess what they're doing and what they're not doing, and make the changes that they need to make in order to have these important one-on-ones. I don't know if that answers the question, but
well, it seems like it's a move from the head to the heart, Dave. It's a heart conversation of I care, and it's a genuine source of caring that I choose to support and to grow and encourage and to magnify, essentially. So what I'm wondering now, and thank you so far for this. This has been great. I'm wondering
Sure.
now, how do we help a leader, a client get started with this? How do we move them into the magnifying process? What does that take?
I think what we need to do is get them to understand and embrace the fact that a magnifying conversation is much more than just sitting down with someone and going through a checklist, rote one-on-one. So we need to give them examples of what magnifying means, and we also need to draw out from them those magnifying moments that they've had in their lives, either on the personal side or the business side. But when they get to that point and they really understand and realize that, hopefully there are people in their background that have taken the time to magnify them, whether it's a parent, a grandparent, a coach, a teacher, whatever. But you first have to get them to recognize and appreciate and realize that the process of magnifying is absolutely critical, not only for their lives and their progression as individuals and human beings, but also for others. And once they get to that point, that aha moment, then it's off to the races. You can equip them with the tools and the conversation points, like those 3 points I mentioned, and so forth. But they just have to embrace and be fully aware of the importance of being involved and magnifying others. And once they get to that point, then the good ones will never turn back. I mean, I know many CEOs that would not ever miss having a one-on-one with an individual because they believe that it's so important. So they actually build their calendars around those conversations if they're been formally scheduled. So it just becomes a way of life. If that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. As you said, the incident with your family, it activated you. It was a moment where you were able to see wisdom that was given to you, and then you found your way to pass it along. There seems to be the role of the messenger, the one who's going to be bringing forth what is magnified in themselves. I think this is a key thing: is that if a leader doesn't inventory the latent wisdom in themselves, then they don't organize the generosity that this process has. And so I often say, you know a lot more than you can ever say. So you might not know how much you can magnify until you magnify. Do you find that to be true?
Oh, that's exactly right. Absolutely. And you touch on another thing. It's my conviction, John, that every individual that I've met, yourself, myself, everybody, is stronger, more courageous, more capable, and has greater capacity than they give themselves credit for. And they also need to realize that. And when they get to that point, then they can say, hey, there's a lot of good that I can do in this company, in this world. And again, I go back to that one-on-one as the most important leadership skill and practice that should be mastered first, because everything else regarding leadership is built upon an individual's ability to effectively conduct these magnifying conversations with others. So you're absolutely right. People can do it if they want to, and if they realize the high value and the criticality of doing it. Once you get them to that point, then again, they're willing and able.
That's exciting. That's exciting to even consider how powerful curiosity can be, or how powerful courage. You mentioned courage a lot, Dave. It reminds me of the word itself. The core in French is from the heart, to operate from that place. And then the compassion, wanting others to suffer less, to strengthen them, the resilience that you give them. I just sense how much this means to you. Even the way you describe it, I'm inspired. Well, what else would you like our listeners to know, Dave? What else is important here that we haven't mentioned yet?
John, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. I mean, there's some mechanics involved. Like I said, those 3 key ingredients of conducting a powerful one-on-one conversation: that the high standards, the high responsiveness, and the high care, connection, and concern. But I just like to say that as I've looked at, and I've been a student of leadership all my life. I've taught all kinds of leadership theories. There's hundreds and hundreds of books, podcasts, articles, what have you. And I just don't find anyone spending time or taking the time to go back to this fundamental, plain and simple approach that is so critical in becoming an effective leader, and that is conducting his one-on-ones in a magnifying and powerful way. So I just want to say that I can't emphasize enough the importance of mastering this it's more than a skill; it's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle, and whether you're a parent, an employer, whatever, how can you help others? Because when they get to that point where they're trying to look to help magnify others, again, making them great, they in turn are magnified. So it's a two-way process. And I just want to convey my passion for this and willingness to help people become great magnifiers themselves. So
it's an amazing thing, Dave, and what really the underlying theme for me in my own magnifying experiences, what it connects for me is stewardship, service, is to serve someone.
Yep.
I often think if I'm helping someone, well, are they weak? So therefore I have to help. No, not exactly. Are they broken? Should I fix? No, not exactly. I'm not the lifeguard on the tower, and I'm not the hero. I would probably throw them in the pool if that was the case, and that's not what I want to do. But I'm hearing you describe a certain sort of serving someone who you see as great already. There's a certain seer that helps them appear, and this really moves me. This piece about the one who sees it, recognizes the greatness because they see something in themselves to give. And then as it's passed along, the receiver also shines back on the giver so that greatness comes in both. You hit the nail on the head there for me in how I've experienced things in my life. And I'm so glad that you brought it up into the larger spectrum of things, Dave. It's not just local to great business leadership, but it's local to parenting. It's local to being a good husband or wife. It's local to every relationship that we can move and influence. It's a great place to come from. Very third person oriented. Yeah, this is great. This is great. Thank you so much for sharing this process.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I guess just one last thought is that the real magic of magnification is that it has the ability to touch many, many people. As I magnify you, you will magnify someone else. They in turn will magnify others. And it just grows and grows and grows. And so that's the real benefit and value of doing this. It just can have far-reaching positive consequences on individuals.
Wow. Isn't that great? That's an amazing thing of what you can draw out and also what you can put in. So this is excellent. I'm so glad you're here. You've been listening to Dave Knibbe and, of course, JD. And this podcast, the topic has been about magnifying leaders and building greatness. If you'd like more information about programs and topics like these, you can go to highlevelperformance.com. That's highlevelperformance.com, and get yourself coached or get your team coached. And it's probably just that time. If you're thinking about you'll be less busy later, that's never true. We all tell ourselves that necessary lie. We've worked with superstars. No one is ever less busy later than to get started on a change. Remember, the brevity of life is upon us all. So we hope this podcast has served you well. If you'd like to get a hold of us on the email, you can email me at VIPcoach@highlevelperformance.com, VIPcoach@highlevelperformance.com. Thank you very much. You've been listening to the VIP Coach Podcast, Freedom, Lifestyle, and Growth. Are you ready for high-level performance? Find us online at highlevelperformance.com and get yourself coached, raise your A game, and experience the difference. Pull it all together. Get your team coached to high-level performance and become part of the community today and position your company for greatness. It's about freedom, lifestyle, and growth. The VIP Coach.